let's use Scratch to introduce us to functions in Python. So moving from Scratch to Python, we're going to look at broadcast and wait to help us understand functions. We can use broadcasts in Scratch, for example using a message. When we broadcast it, we can run some blocks when I receive message, for example. And in Python we can define a function, so we can write a function with some code and then we can call that. So in a broadcast, we broadcast it, we call it if you like, and in Python we have a function, we call that function. So we write some code in Python and then the name of that function, when we call it, it will run that code. The same as in Scratch, when we have some blocks and we broadcast that message, we can run those blocks. So in Scratch we have broadcast message, and then when I receive message we run the blocks. So what happens in Scratch? Let's have a look at broadcasts in Scratch. So here we've got a program. You can see the cat just moves round in a square. So it points in direction, repeat 4 times, moves 100 steps, turning 90 degrees. So broadcasts are quite handy when we've got 2 sprites, for example, and we want to move one of them after another one moves. So they take it in turns to move. So here we're going to add the dog, and now when we repeat the code, the dog does the same as the cat. But what happens if we want the dog to move after the cat, for example? Well, we can use the broadcast. So here we can add the broadcast to the cat, and to the dog we have when I receive the message. So broadcast the message and receive the message. Now we can see the cat moves in the square, then the dog moves. So if we want that to happen consecutively, so the cat moves, then the dog, then the cat, we can use the message and use a new message. So the dog will send a message, and that will mean broadcast the message next, and then the cat, when it receives the message next, it can move. So we're going to start off when the green flag clicked, and then we just repeat the code for when the next broadcast is received. So now when we run that, you can see the cat moves, then the dog moves, then the cat moves, then the dog moves. So that's our broadcast. So we saw there, we run some blocks in the code from the cat, and then we sent a broadcast message from the cat, and when the dog received it, run the blocks, and then we sent another message, and when the cat received that, then that run the blocks again. So we can see that we can broadcast a message, receive a message in Scratch. Now there is a difference between broadcast and wait. Here, when we run the blocks from the message with the dog, it goes back to the same place. So when the cat blocks are running, instead of carrying on running, they wait until those other blocks from the dog are finished before they carry on. So let's see an example of that. Let's look at this example. Here we've got the cat moving, then waiting, stopping, and then moving again. So it moves twice. Now what we're going to do here, we're going to show how broadcast and wait are different. So here we've got the dog receives the message when the cat broadcasts the message. So we're going to move the cat, it's going to broadcast, and then it's going to move again. So let's see that. The cat moves, and the dog says stop, but the cat already has moved. So the cat does not stop when the dog says move. So when it's broadcast, it doesn't wait. So we can use broadcast and wait. So this time it's different. Let's run it. The cat moves, stops. It stops while the dog says stop, waits, and then when that is finished, it moves again. So we can look in Python and see the example here. We print move 100 steps, then we can call the function. So rather than broadcast, we're going to call the function by using its name, then these brackets. then we're going to move 100 steps again. The function is already written beforehand. So this function called message1, we're just going to print stopping at. So when we run the program, you can see it says move 100 steps, then it prints stop, and then it carries on by moving 100 steps again. So that's very similar to the broadcast and wait. So we could see there in Python that we called the function, it ran the code, and then it went back and started again, the same really like broadcast and wait. Now something that is important that's different from Scratch and Python is this idea of global variables and local variables. So let's have a look at Scratch first. Now let's change our Scratch program to add a variable. So we're just going to call this x, and we're going to start off by setting x to 0. So in the cat, when we run the code, run the blocks, x will be 0. Now in the code, in the dog, we're going to change it. So instead of saying stop, it's going to say x. And back to the cat, again, we can use, well, we're not going to use say, we'll use think, so it looks different, and we're going to think of x. We're just going to change it so it's easier to see. So then think x for 2 seconds. So let's run that. We can see what happens. Cat moves, dog says 0, cat moves, it thinks 1. So there we had the variable x is inside the cat code, then it's inside the dog code, then it's inside the cat code. Let's have a look at that again. Cat moves, dog says 0, which is x, then the cat thinks x, which is 1. We saw there in Scratch we had x to start off with in the cat, then we used it in the dog blocks, and then we used it in the cat again. So we could use it everywhere, so that's called global. But in Python and other programming languages, it's better to use local variables. So what does that mean? Well, if we look at our diagram again, we have x in the first code, like the cat code if you like, but when we use the broadcast, it can't be used in the dog blocks. So the idea is that variables used just in the place where you're going to use it and not in the function. So the function has its own variables. So how are you going to use variables if they're not global? Well, in Python you can pass things like variables and you can return them as well. So in this example we've got x, we're going to pass that to the function, and in the function itself we're going to take that x and call it y, and then use that as y in that function. So looking at our Python code, we've got x equals 0, and then we've got it when we call the function in the brackets, and in the function itself we've got y and print stop y. When we run that, you can see that we move 100 steps, then we stop 0, which is our y, and we've passed the x to the y in the function. In our example you can see here we've got x, we've got y in our function code, we can actually return y as well. So let's have a look at that in Python. So we've got our code here, we've got x, and now we're going to put y equals y plus 1 in our function code so it changes, and we're going to return that back to x. So when we call message1, we've got x equals message1 with x in brackets. So we pass it, and then it's going to come back and return it to x after the function has been called. And then we're going to print x after that. So let's run that. It says move 100 steps, stop 0, move 100 steps, then none. So what's happened there? Well, the x hasn't got a value because we didn't return it. So we need to put return in. So now we return y, and then that gives the value of y back to x. So now when we move the steps, stop 0, we have the return of y, which is 1, go back into x. That was pass and return in functions. Okay, thank you for watching. If you haven't already, please subscribe. Bye for now.